The checkout line was a special kind of purgatory. Clara clutched the handle of the shopping cart, her knuckles white. In the seat, her 10-month-old son, Leo, babbled happily, entirely unaware of the frantic calculation happening in his mother's head. The small pile of groceries on the conveyor belt represented a week of careful planning: bread, eggs, a jar of pasta sauce, and the most important item, a large can of premium baby formula. It was the only brand Leo's sensitive stomach could handle, and its price tag felt like a personal insult every time she saw it. Her gaze flickered to the debit card in her hand, a flimsy piece of plastic that held the entirety of her worldly wealth. She had checked the balance that morning: $9.17. The formula alone was over 30. The rest of the groceries pushed the total closer to 50. It was a hopeless equation. "That will be $48.62, the cashier said, her voice flat and bored. Clara's heart hammered against her ribs. She had been praying for a miracle, a forgotten deposit, a bank error in her favor. But miracles were for other people. She slid the card into the reader, held her breath, and waited for the inevitable. The machine beeped twice, a cruel, mocking sound. Insufficient funds. Heat flooded her cheeks, a painful, prickling wave of humiliation. She could feel the eyes of the person behind her, could sense the growing impatience of the line. "I'm so sorry," she whispered, her voice cracking. I must have made a mistake. Can you take the formula off?" The cashier sighed, a gust of annoyance, and reached for the can. Each clank of the metal against the counter was a blow to Clara's pride. Taking away her son's food. She had failed. Tears burned behind her eyes, and she blinked furiously to keep them from falling. She couldn't afford the formula, but she also couldn't afford to break down in the middle of a grocery store. "And the eggs," Clara added, her voice barely audible. "Please, just tell me when to stop," the cashier grumbled, voiding the items. It was in that moment of profound shame that a low, calm voice spoke from directly behind her. "Not today." Clara flinched, turning her head slightly. The man behind her was tall, dressed in a perfectly tailored dark gray suit that probably cost more than her rent. His face was all sharp angles and serious lines, his dark hair impeccably styled. He looked utterly out of place amongst the fluorescent lights and linoleum floors. He met her gaze with eyes the color of steel, and there was an intensity in them that made her breath catch. He stepped forward, placing a black credit card on the counter. "Put everything back," he told the cashier, his tone leaving no room for argument. "And add 4 more cans of that formula. The same kind." The cashier's eyes widened, but she did as she was told without a word. Clara stared, dumbfounded. "What? No, you can't. I don't know you." "My name is Julian," he said, his gaze softening slightly as it fell on Leo, who was now chewing happily on the cart's safety strap. "And it seems your son and I have similar tastes in fine dining." He offered a ghost of a smile, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. "I can't let you do this," Clara insisted, her pride warring with the overwhelming wave of relief that threatened to buckle her knees. "It's too much. It's a can of formula," he stated simply, though his card was now paying for $150 worth of groceries. "Please, allow me." The transaction was complete before she could protest further. The cashier bagged everything with newfound efficiency, her earlier sullenness replaced by a kind of awed respect. Julian took the heaviest bags himself, his movements fluid and confident. "I can carry those," Clara said weakly, feeling completely out of her depth. "I'm sure you can," he replied, his voice gentle. "But you don't have to." He walked with her towards the exit, the automatic doors sliding open to reveal a steady downpour. Clara's heart sank again. It was a 20-minute walk home, and she hadn't brought a cover for the stroller. Julian seemed to notice her hesitation. He glanced at the rain, then at Leo, then back at her. "My car is just here. Let me give you a ride." It wasn't a question. Before she could form an objection, he was leading her to a sleek black sedan parked in the first spot. He unlocked it, opened the back door, and waited patiently as she unbuckled a confused but compliant Leo from the shopping cart. He didn't rush her or make her feel incompetent as she fumbled with the straps. He simply waited, holding an umbrella over her and the baby. The car's interior smelled of leather and something clean and expensive. It was a world away from her cramped, second-floor apartment with its peeling paint and rattling windows. The drive was short and silent. Clara gave him her address, her mind reeling. She kept stealing glances at him, trying to understand what was happening. Men like him didn't exist in her world. Men like him didn't buy groceries for strangers. When they arrived, he carried the bags up the rickety flight of stairs to her apartment door. He set them down and looked at her, his expression unreadable. "Thank you," she said, the words feeling utterly inadequate. "I don't know how I can ever repay you." "There's nothing to repay," he said. He looked at Leo, who was now nestled in her arms, and a flicker of something profound and sorrowful passed through his eyes. It was there and gone in an instant. "Take care of him." Then he turned and walked away, leaving Clara standing in her doorway, surrounded by groceries, her heart pounding with a mixture of gratitude and deep, unsettling suspicion. The next day, a sleek black envelope arrived by courier. It was addressed to her. Inside, on thick, creamy letterhead bearing the logo of Vance Enterprises, was a job offer. It was for a position as a junior analyst in their finance department, at a salary that was more than triple what she had ever earned. The offer stated that her resume had been passed along by a trusted source and that Mr. Vance himself had personally recommended her for an interview, which he had decided to waive. The coincidence was too great, the generosity too extreme. This wasn't kindness, it was something else. A plan, a manipulation. Her initial gratitude curdled into a cold, defensive anger. No one just gave things away like this without wanting something in return. She thought of the look in his eyes when he had gazed at Leo. A chill ran down her spine. Clara found a babysitter for a few hours, put on her only decent blazer, and took the bus downtown to the gleaming glass tower that housed Vance Enterprises. The lobby was an imposing cathedral of marble and steel. She announced herself to the receptionist, her voice shaking only slightly, and demanded to see Julian Vance. She expected to be turned away, but minutes later, she was being escorted into a private elevator that ascended silently to the top floor. His office was vast, with a floor-to-ceiling window that offered a breathtaking view of the city. Julian stood by the window, his back to her, looking out at the world he so clearly owned. "Mr. Vance," she began, her voice tight. He turned, his face calm. "Clara, I was hoping you'd come. I want to know what this is," she said, holding up the letter. "The groceries were one thing, but this? This is not a random act of kindness. What do you want from me?" He didn't answer immediately. He gestured to one of the plush chairs opposite his massive desk. "Please sit." "I'd rather stand," she said, crossing her arms. "I'm not here for a friendly chat. I want answers. Are you trying to buy me? Is this about my son? Who are you?" Julian's stoic facade seemed to crack. A deep sigh escaped him, one that seemed to carry an immense weight. He walked over to his desk, but instead of sitting, he picked up a silver frame that had been facing away from the door. He held it for a moment before turning it toward her. The picture was of a beautiful, smiling woman holding a newborn baby. The baby was wrapped in a blue blanket, his tiny face peaceful in sleep. "That was my wife, Amelia," Julian said, his voice thick with an emotion she couldn't place. "And that was our son." He paused, and the silence in the room became heavy, suffocating. "His name was Leo." Clara felt the air leave her lungs. The anger and suspicion drained out of her, replaced by a sudden, gut-wrenching wave of empathy. She sank into the chair she had just refused. "He was born with a congenital heart defect," Julian continued, his gaze fixed on the photograph, his voice low and strained. "We had the best doctors, the best care money could buy. It didn't matter. We had him for 11 months. He finally looked up at Clara, and his steel-gray eyes were filled with a raw, unguarded pain. Amelia, she never recovered. She passed away 2 years later. An accident, they said, but I know she died of a broken heart." He set the frame down gently. "Yesterday, in that store I saw you. You were fighting for your son. You were willing to humiliate yourself, to go hungry, just to make sure he had what he needed. And his name, when I heard you say his name to him in the car, it was like a sign." He shook his head, running a hand through his hair. "This isn't about buying you, Clara. It's not a debt you have to repay. When I saw you, I saw everything I lost, everything I failed to protect. I have all this." He gestured around the opulent office, "and none of it could save my family. Helping you, helping your Leo, it's the first thing that has made any sense in a very long time. Your resume was easy enough to find. I saw your qualifications in forensic accounting. You're overqualified for the position I offered, but I hoped it would be a start. A way to give you the security I couldn't give my own wife. Tears were streaming down Clara's face now, silent tears of understanding and shared sorrow. All her fears, all her suspicions, had been so wrong. This wasn't a predator. This was a man drowning in grief, reaching for a lifeline. I'm so sorry, she whispered. Don't be, he said softly. Just let me help. Please. Clara took the job. She moved from a junior analyst to a senior position within months, her sharp mind and relentless work ethic impressing everyone. Julian kept a professional distance at the office, but their connection deepened outside its walls. He would ask about Leo, his questions gentle and respectful. Sometimes, he would bring by a toy or a book for him. He never overstepped. He simply became a quiet, steady presence in their lives, a guardian angel cloaked in designer suits. Clara found herself relying on him, not for money, but for companionship. She told him about her struggles as a single mother, and he listened with an empathy no one else had ever shown. He, in turn, began to speak more of his Amelia and his Leo, sharing memories that were both painful and precious. They were two lonely souls finding solace in each other's company. One evening, while working late on the quarterly reports, Clara uncovered something that made her blood run cold. There were discrepancies, subtle, cleverly hidden transfers of funds to an offshore shell corporation. It was the work of an expert, designed to be almost undetectable. The amounts were small at first, but they were escalating. Someone was bleeding Vance Enterprises dry from the inside. She brought her findings to Julian immediately. He studied the data, his jaw tightening. I know who this is, he said, his voice grim. Marcus Thorne. He was my partner when I started this company. I forced him out a decade ago. He was reckless, greedy, unethical. I should have known he wouldn't just disappear. The threat escalated faster than they could have imagined. Before they could complete their internal investigation, Thorne went on the offensive. He leaked a carefully doctored version of the financials to the press, implicating Julian in a massive fraud scheme. But he added a cruel twist. The digital trail of the forged documents was made to look like it originated from a single terminal, Clara's. The news broke, and their world imploded. Suddenly, Clara was no longer a rising star. She was the prime suspect, the single mother plucked from obscurity by a billionaire CEO to be his accomplice. The narrative was poisonous and plausible. Regulators launched a formal investigation. The company's stock plummeted. He's trying to destroy me by using you, Julian said, his face a mask of fury and regret, as they stood in his office, the city lights twinkling obliviously below. Clara, I am so sorry I brought this into your life. Don't be, she said, her voice firm. She was scared, terrified of losing everything she had just gained, of having Leo taken from her. But she wasn't broken. He made a mistake. He framed a forensic accountant. We're going to find the real evidence, and we're going to burn him with it. For the next 48 hours, they worked without sleep, fueled by coffee and a shared sense of righteous anger. Julian used his resources, granting her access to every server, every encrypted file. Clara used her skills, diving deep into the company's digital architecture. She followed the ghost trail Marcus had left, peeling back layers of code and rerouted IP addresses. She was relentless, brilliant. Julian watched her, his admiration growing into something deeper, something warmer. He saw not a victim, but a warrior. Finally, in the darkest hour before dawn, she found it. A single data packet, improperly deleted. A digital fingerprint. It was the original, undoctored file, sent from an IP address that traced back to a holding company owned by Marcus Thorne. It was the smoking gun. An emergency board meeting was called for the next morning. Marcus was there, looking confident, offering his condolences to the board members for Julian's unfortunate lapse in judgment. He was proposing a takeover to stabilize the company. Julian let him talk. Then, when he had finished, he simply nodded to Clara. She stood up, connected her laptop to the main screen, and with calm, chilling precision, she walked the entire board through the digital evidence. She exposed the shell corporations, revealed the original files, and laid Marcus Thorne's entire scheme bare for everyone to see. The silence in the room was absolute, broken only by the sound of Marcus's face draining of all color. His ruin was swift and total. By the end of the day, he was in federal custody, and Vance Enterprises was issuing a press release that named Clara as the hero who had saved the company. That night, back in the quiet of Julian's office, the adrenaline finally wore off, leaving them both exhausted and emotionally raw. The city below was a silent river of light. "You saved everything," Julian said, his voice filled with awe. He stepped closer to her, his gaze searching hers. "You and Leo. You came into my life like a storm and washed away all the gray. You saved us first," she whispered, her heart aching with an emotion she had been too afraid to name. "Clara," he said, his voice dropping to a near whisper. He gently cupped her face in his hands. "I spent years living in a ghost story of my own making. I thought I could never feel anything again. But seeing you with your son, watching you fight for him, for me, for this company, I'm not just grateful. I'm in love with you." Tears welled in her eyes as the truth of her own feelings rose to meet his. "I love you too, Julian." He closed the small space between them and kissed her. It wasn't a kiss of frantic passion, but of homecoming. It was a promise of quiet mornings and shared laughter, of healing and building something new and beautiful from the wreckage of their pasts. 1 year later, the sterile mansion was no more. It was a home, filled with the delightful chaos of a toddler. Toys were scattered across what was once a pristine Persian rug. The sound of Leo's laughter echoed through the halls as Julian chased him around the living room, pretending to be a monster. Clara stood in the doorway, watching them. She was now the chief financial officer of Vance Enterprises, a respected and powerful executive. But in this moment, she was just a woman watching the two boys who owned her heart. A silver band with a modest, elegant diamond rested on her left hand. Julian caught her eye and smiled, a genuine, soul-deep smile that reached his eyes and transformed his entire face. He scooped Leo into his arms and walked over to her, kissing her softly. "Happy birthday to our little man," he murmured against her lips. Later that evening, after the last of the party guests had left and Leo was sleeping soundly in his crib upstairs, Clara and Julian stood on the balcony, looking at the stars. She leaned her head against his shoulder, feeling a sense of peace that she once thought was impossible. She thought back to that day in the grocery store, to the crushing weight of her despair and humiliation. It felt like a lifetime ago. A single, desperate moment had led to this. A wrong turn that had put her on the only right path. "What are you thinking about?" Julian asked, wrapping his arm tighter around her. "About how strange life is," she said, a small smile playing on her lips. "How the worst day of my life turned out to be the best thing that ever happened to me." He kissed the top of her head. "It wasn't a coincidence, Clara. It was a second chance. For both of us." And as she looked at the family she had found, she knew he was right. This was not just a happy ending. It was a beautiful beginning.